Hi, I'm Beck and I'm a property investor.
And I'm Daria. I own my own home and I'm curious about investing.
We're the hosts of Investors in the Wild.
We've heard it all before. Build your wealth, get expert advice, learn about high yield, high growth investments, blah, blah, blah.
That's just not us. We're real mates with real talk about real estate. No ego, no financial advice.
It's all about wins you can use right now.
Let's get into it.
Hello, we're here today with Emma. Emma is one of the first investor friends I call when I'm tossing up options, especially around renovating and adding value to that. And I'm so excited to learn more from her today. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
We are really happy to have you as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name's Emma. I'm in my late 30s, been married for 8 years, have 2 young kids. So Jack and Tilly, they're 4 and 2. Live on the Central Coast, so in Terrigal in New South Wales. I've been here for about 3 years. So I bought our house about 4 years ago, originally from Sydney. So we did the typical post-COVID move. We went, hey, we're working remote now. Finally, I can move out of Sydney. And that had always been a dream for my husband and I. So yeah, live 5-minute walk from which I'm loving that sea change. Work in the tech industry and love it.
Would you mind just taking us through an overview of your investment journey for us?
I remember being quite young. I can't recall the age, like whether I was a kid or a teenager, but it was like some point. My brother, who's 7 years older, he's quite entrepreneurial. He walked me through this spreadsheet, which showed me how property investing works. It showed me, okay, so if you save for your first deposit, and then what you'll do is you'll then invest that into property, then assuming that it has, say, a growth rate of like 7% annually, here's how that's going to compound. And then at a certain point, you're going to use some of that equity to then invest in the second property. I remember thinking, oh, wow, so there's a really smart way in which you can make money and you only really need to save for that first deposit. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize about property investing. It's not like you're living on breadcrumbs forever because you're constantly just throwing your money into property. Like just save for the first property and then reinvest equity. So I remember like having that aha moment pretty young. In 2012, I had about 30 grand and I just went, I need to do something smart with it. We found one, bought it for 315,000. Yes, you could get a house.
Oh my God.
And we actually loved the house. It had like period features, it's 100 years old, and it had a pool. I've got earnings about getting an investment property with a pool.
You were in Sydney before you decided to make your first property purchase in the Hunter, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So just to can I understand what made you choose the Hunter? Like what made you think, right, I'm going to go? Because the Hunter has been a dream of mine, let me tell you. I always imagined getting like a holiday home in a winery, sipping wine on the balcony, although now I'm on the no alcohol bandwagon, but having non-alcoholic reds on the balcony in front of the fireplace in winter, that is my dream. But I would never think that's going to be my first investment property, So I'd love to understand the journey as to what made you think I want to invest in the Hunter.
Yeah. One was just because I knew it, just because of the connection to my husband's dad was a GM at a real estate agency in the Hunter as well. So because of that, we just knew that area. He could give some advice. He could help us source a property. I just knew that at that point in time, I only had $30,000.
Right.
So it has to be regional because there's $30,000 as a deposit's just not going to go far in Sydney. Maybe back then I could have done West and that could have been an option, but it's just so I thought that was just a way to get onto the property ladder. We bought our next house in 2020. And then the next house after that was 2022. We chose Cessnock because I wanted a property that had a good balance between yield, so where we could get a decent enough rental return, where we're not going to be too cash, where we go, oh, if I'm out of a job, I can't pay for it. And that's always been sort of a mindset when it comes to investing. I just get a little bit fearful about being too negatively geared. Because then you just don't have as much financial freedom where you always need to have a high paying job. Your first house that you buy doesn't need to be the one you live in. Like you could buy interstate, you could buy regional, and you're not going to need to save as much to do that.
That is groundbreaking, because I think we just want to adult, like you want to adult, you want to live in there. So you don't have that discipline to think, I'm not going to live in there. I'm going to invest. I'm going to build my wealth over time, and then I'll use the gains to buy the property I live in eventually.
Yes.
We don't. I think 90% of people don't have that temperament. They don't have that patience. We all want to just jump in and move in and live and pick out furniture and do all the fun stuff. But I think the importance of that mindset of like thinking long term is so critical. And then the benefits that you gain as a result. You've got 3 now, and that's amazing to know that, you know?
Yeah. And every now and then I'll have conversations with like friends, family, like just like loved ones, and like they'll be like, oh God, I feel like the market's just getting away from me. I'm trying to save deposit for our first home. And I was like, hey, have you ever thought about just putting the pause on that idea, and just because it feels like you're chasing a moving target here.
Yeah.
It's like, just use the money that you have, get an investment property. And it means that, yes, you're renting for a little bit longer. And in a few years from now, you might be in a different position. And then you've got this equity in this property that you've invested. Like, at least you're just getting on the ladder.
It's just a lot easier to buy something that you wouldn't necessarily move into as your first place or your second place even.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also not needing to compromise for the first one. Like, it's just like to say, like, you're in your 20s, you're living in Bondi. Like, how are you going to buy here? I'm like, you don't have to. Stay renting there.
Yeah. It feels like this has been such, I don't know if you've noticed, but 3 of 3 conversations now, the investors are like, you don't need to buy where you want to live.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's an aha. I feel like it's just like this. It's a secret. All the little investors are running around and telling each other, but the wider world doesn't know about all this. So listen out, people. You do not necessarily want to live in the property that you invest in. That is the takeaway from all of these episodes, for sure.
Yeah. You've always spoken about financial freedom. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means for you?
I just always believe that you never know what the future you is going to want. And in addition to that, what curveballs life could throw. It's like, who knows? Like, maybe in 20 years from now, I'm still loving tech and I'm still doing it. But it's like, I want to not have to. Like, I want to, if I wake up one day and decide I want to go study again, that's like just really important to me to keep building towards that. So there's that part of it. And then in addition to that, like, I've got 2 young kids, like they'll be in school soon. I want the flexibility to be able to drop back in career if I need to, reduce my income if I need to. The financial foundations are there. And then also just building a great life for the kids as well, without needing to rely on having a high-paying job to do that. And then also not knowing what curveballs life could throw at you.
That is the fear. And that's one of the big barriers. You imagine that that's your future, that you're going to be chasing your tail, trying to make the mortgage repayments, or you imagine I'm going to have a life of like not going to every restaurant I want to go to all the time and restricting myself. And so, yeah, I think the importance of investing, but doing it in taking the right steps to do it in a as well-researched way as you possibly can is the key here, because I think there's like this perception that people have that anyone who invests is well off, but that's not necessarily the case. It's got to be a viable investment, and you do have to make sure that what you're investing in is within your means, and that you're getting the rental income, as you mentioned before, that's going to, even if you're paying a gap, that you can afford to do it, so that you're building on that wealth, not chasing your tail, trying to make that repayment.
What calcs do you do, Em, to make sure that you and your husband don't end up in that scenario where you're kind of chasing your tail and out of control with debt, and you know that when you buy something, it is actually manageable? What's your process?
I think the main thing is just knowing, this is going to sound really simple, but it's just looking at what the mortgage repayments will be and what the rental income will be, and just seeing what the difference is. And then actually I can say there was a learning with the Cessnock property, because we bought that at lower interest rates. And so it means the gap did grow quite significantly, like more significantly than I would have liked, but it's okay, we've managed, particularly because the Maitland property is very much cash flow positive now because the rental income grew over time. So that's kind of plugging the gap. Yeah, so I think they're the two things, but I think the learning, I think this is probably something that they'll consider, like they'll need to remember 10 years from now when we go through another interest rate cycle, is that you need to calculate based on future interest rates, not just current. I just did it was like a really simple maths, which I just like, okay, what will the loan repayments be? What will the rental income be? Okay, like it's like $50 shortfall a week. That's manageable. But then it ends up being way more than that. Like I think it ended up being like 300 a week once we got to the peak of interest rates.
Sorry, just on that topic, that's a gold nugget, by the way. It's calculate future interest repayments. Don't just get all excited about the current or interest repayments.
That's a learning. I haven't done that before. I need to do that in future, but I don't know what interest rates were back then. Like they were probably below 5%. And
I remember the Rose Bay apartment was 2.49 and now they're 5.79.
So it's almost getting the current interest rate payment and then saying, if you doubled that, could I, that would be this much that I'd have to pay, and could I afford that, and sort of just planning for the worst case scenario, which is pretty much what we're all living. We're currently living in the worst case scenario with all our interest rate payments, right? But I think that's a really important one, is just to be mindful of that when you're making your first investment purchase. Because especially with people with lack of experience, they fall into that trap of thinking, that's what I'm going to owe, like for the rest of, for the next 30 years, I'm going to owe this much money. But no, just be mindful that you might need to double the interest rate potentially because of the world we're living in. So just factor in that into your calculations.
Yes, I think a lot of people that are, I'd say around our age group, who have not lived through high interest rates before.
Yeah.
And when we say live through it, like actually had mortgages through this, like I think a lot of us have learnt that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 3 years ago, we were just like, oh, money's so cheap, this is great. And didn't know that it's like, hey, 7%'s a potential reality. We just didn't, and I was not thinking like that a few years ago.
Yeah. I remember when interest rates first started going up, for the first time, I thought to myself, hang on a second, what would be the average interest rate over the last, say, 30 years? And I looked at it, and this was when the rates were around 4%. And I saw the average was closer to 7%. And I was like, oh, dear God, this is not a completely unrealistic scenario that it reaches 7%. And I can't wait for the next interest rate cycle, whenever that is, because I'm locking in my 2.49% for 10 years next time. Like, why didn't I lock those interests? I would hope that my thinking from now on will be, once it hits 2 or 3%, I will think to myself, good enough.
Good,
Like, sure, you could lose some, but you could lose more. The next time I get a rate like that, I'll be locking it in for as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, well, good luck getting a rate like that, girlfriend.
It could be a while. You mentioned your 8-year lull, and then you bought 2 pretty close together. I'd love to understand, what are the things that you did that let you really build momentum and buy 2 properties so quickly?
And so when we're buying our now family home, that's where I went, oh, wow, this increased in value a lot. That taught me just the power of holding. Like, buy a property, hold. Like, as long as if it's a really bad investment, don't hold. But if it's a good enough investment where it's growing at a decent rate each year, hold. I did get a bit into shares. So I do like both, like as investing vehicles. What I like about property is the power of leverage. I'll explain what I mean by that. If just say you've got $100,000, just say that's how much you've got, and it's like you can either go invest that into an index fund, like so shares, and then you're going to, and just say it's returning 7% a year, it's going to be 7% on that 100,000. But if it's property, and just say that's $100,000 for a $500,000 property, you're getting 7% on the 500, not the 100. So you're actually getting better capital gains over time by using someone else's money, that someone else being the banks. So, but what I like about shares is the liquidity of it. I need to come up with a bit of money. It's easier just to part ways with a little bit of your share portfolio. Every time I get paid, I just put a little bit away into share.
One of the themes that keeps coming up in all of our conversations is intention behind everything that you're doing. And so if you're looking at long-term wealth, what you're saying is you use your property for that, but you've got the shares for quick cash. Like if you need quick cash, you go down the share rabbit hole, and you've got both in place, and it's just about which one you leverage based on your goal at that particular time.
Yeah.
And a lot of this investment stuff is gambling. It's like you need to invest in the right shares as well, right? That's really tough, because for someone who doesn't, again, I've got shares in a bunch of places, but it's just because of the companies I've worked with and they've given me shares, right? So I don't know anything about it. And it would be a total guess, like Russian roulette.
Dara, you've mentioned that it's like gambling, which
Gambling.
I giggled about it because sometimes I have felt a bit, I really do feel like this is a coin toss and I don't know if it's going to land up or down. But I do think there are ways you can manage the risks with property and kind of be quite calculating in a way that you can't with gambling. And so maybe this is a good segue into how you choose which properties you're going to buy and kind of what factors you consider when you're looking at, all right, do I buy this?
First thing, I have a bias for homes, and I've just learned from it's the land that appreciates, grows over time, not the dwelling. The dwelling depreciates over time. Everything we own, they are houses. Like we haven't done units before. And I know that in our investor circle, Beck, that there's a lot of people who've learnt the hard way through units. Yeah, so just luckily we haven't had to learn that or deal with strata or anything like that. So that's the first thing. So bias for land. And the second thing, I learned this from the Property Couch podcast. And they talk about owner occupier versus like something that's like more appealing to investors. Because, and then another thing they say, owner occupiers buy with their hearts,
yeah,
and investors buy with their calculators. So it's the owner occupiers who really who will keep outbidding themselves. Like where they're like, no, let's throw an extra 20, let's throw an extra 30. We really want this house. We love it. Like we're going to like grow our family here. Like, so they will stretch it, and like investors will be like, oh, nah, this is getting above market value. Now I'm going to walk away. So buying something that has owner occupier appeal, since my husband's handy, like, and he's in trades, he's like a jack of all trades. Like he can increase value by renovating, like playing around the floor plan, converting a laundry into a bathroom. So then it's a 2-bedroom house, not a 1-bedroom, because most families don't want a 1-bathroom. If there's a way in which we can add an extra bedroom without doing an extension, like where it's just like playing around the floor plan, we'll do that. So then again, it's more appealing to the owner occupier. With Maitland, the lounge room was in this weird rectangular shape where it was fairly easy to block off part of it to create an extra bedroom. So that made it a 3-bedroom plus study home, which is very appealing to families and owner occupiers. We might have spent about 20 grand on that reno, so not a ton.
I think this goes back to what came up in an earlier conversation, Beck, where it's about before you're investing in your property, it's really having a view of who your end customer is. And I think that's kind of the key takeaway, that Emma, that you're targeting the owner occupier. You want someone who's going to purchase that house using it. And again, I think the mistake that I've made when I'm going in to inspect a property is I'm looking at it for what I would like to live in, whereas the key is to look at it for what your end user, what your end user wants. So yeah, being very clear about that.
Hey, it's Feck. I wanted to jump in real quick. Em clearly gives a lot of gold nuggets when she talks through her investing decisions. And she just touched on 2 that we haven't heard before, and one that we have heard from other investors. and it's worth talking about them. First, Emma values land and homes. This comes up later in the episode as well. Emma's averse to apartments. She also talks a lot about owner-occupier appeal, and you're going to hear she really obsesses over owner-occupier appeal, and especially having your end customer in mind. And then finally, adding value to property. We've now spoken to a few investors. Every single one of them talks about buying a place that you can add value to.
Even what like Faz did. Remember how in Faz's episode he talks about, he put the walled garden up.
Yeah.
And when he could hear people on the security videos when they were doing inspections to buy the place going, oh my God, this yard looks so nice with that garden. We definitely need to bid more for this place. We need to get this place. This has been the nicest garden, that we've seen. And so you really want to get the kind of place where you buy it, maybe it's not that great, and then you add value and people just fall in love with it and want to, pay more to lock it in.
And in fact, it's a garden. It's like they want to bid more just because of a garden.
Yeah, but it's like a $260 garden wall at Bunnings, and you're getting 20 grand extra from it because it's a garden. So it's actually amazing.
Yeah. What happened with the pool?
The pool. Yeah. Keep in mind, we were 26 when we bought this place, and there was a little bit of we could live here, in that purchasing decision. So it wasn't just a investor mindset that we were buying the house with, but it did have a pool. It was a fiberglass pool. There ended up being holes through the pool, and we needed to pay for scuba divers to go in and try and locate these leaks. And luckily we had pretty laid back tenants, but there was years there where they put up with this pool that was pretty much empty and just had all sorts of stuff growing in it. The decision was fill it in or get a new one. So we went, let's just fill it in. Less maintenance costs. So I just think if you're buying a house that's a property for investment purposes, you're not going to live in it. It doesn't need a pool. That's just an extra cost, and it's just an extra thing that has less predictability around the costs, and it's just something you just don't need. So I'd steer away from that.
Side note, pools, I think my learning in life that it's no pools, whether you are living in the property or investing out the property, because you don't spend much time in the pool. You think you're going to spend a lot more. I've got a pool, right? But the cost of maintaining that pool is far outweighs the benefit that my household is getting from it. So definitely I would say no pool ever, unless you want to purchase a resort property somewhere and you want people expect a pool, but otherwise no pool. Pools are terrible. So Emma, you seem to have had a prolific history investing in the Central Coast region. What is your proudest investor moment?
Probably is just holding. There's lots of moments where we could have sold the first one. And I think just choosing to hold, anytime there's been moments of, do we sell it? I remember someone once saying oh, we thought about selling it. And okay, well, what would you do with it? We didn't really have an intelligent answer. But the reality is if we sold it and didn't do anything with it, the money would have just drizzled away, and we would have lost so many capital gains from that. And it's now like a nice little nest egg that's just sitting there, and we don't really need to do anything to it. Second one would be, we did get in at a good time with the house we live in. We got in, so we were looking at it from February 2020. And as you all know, what happened in March 2020, which meant that not a lot of buying was happening after from March 2020 for a good while there. And when we were at home, because nobody could leave the home in that period, we just kept looking back at this house and going, my husband was going, there's so much we can do with this floor plan, and we could really make a good home out of this. And it's not like it was getting snapped up. So it was a good few months. It was just keep going back to the same real estate listing. But at the time when we chose to make an offer, which was June 2020, when things were starting to open back up again for the time being. So that's where we went oh my God, we don't know what the market's going to do. It's crazy times. This is unprecedented what we're going through with COVID and lockdowns and so forth. But that ended up being a really good time to buy. Like if we bought a year later, it would have been so much more.
That is amazing. That is actually, again, okay, I'm going to say gambling again, but what a bet you made. I'll tell you right now, I would never have bought during the peak of COVID. COVID has begun. It's what, June, you said? So
Yeah.
4 months in. It's almost like you step outside yourself. I feel, Emma, that you're the type of woman who steps outside herself to look objectively, like taking all emotion out, taking all fear out, to sort of say, what is a viable investment at this point right now? And you make a move. You're almost like fear-free when it comes to these things.
One thing that did contribute though, because it wasn't just an investment, like it was going to be our family home. We're going to stay here for 20 years. Even if the market's going to completely crash in the next 12 months, we'll just ride that out, because this is going to be our family home that we stay in for 20 years. So, but not in hindsight, like it's like, just say we didn't stay there for long, like just say we only stayed there for 2 years, like we would have done well, because it's like the market did boom after that.
I just want to quickly talk through these latest gold nuggets from Emma. She talks about buying and holding. And something you hear kind of unofficially through investing circles is investors saying you really want to hold for about 10 years. That's when you start to really notice the gains of your property. And Emma's saying the same, buy and hold, because this is an investment. If Emma were to sell this house, she'd immediately lose a good chunk of the gains in capital gains tax. And then she talks about buying properties that people aren't clamoring over, but rather, even though unintentional in this case, buying a place that's been on the market for a little while.
You know, the pattern that I'm picking out here, and I know it's like, you know, a sample size of 2, but there are some similarities with Faz's stuff as well, like really clear on the intent. You know, Faz was like, I want to live in 5 Dock. I want to live in Kiama. Emma's like, we want to live in this area, and this is the kind of house we're looking for, and this is what we can do. And then Faz also looks at places that have been on the market for a while, because at that point, the seller is more motivated. The agent is a little bit more nervous, and there isn't as much competition. So you can play around with the price a bit more. Whereas if you're going and inspecting a place, you know, in Bondi, there's so much competition, and that thing is not staying on the market for longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it feels like there are some common ingredients here. Yeah. I do agree it was risky, but it also feels like you were really clear on your intent. You are targeting a place where there isn't a lot of competition, so that you can play around with that price a little bit more. Yeah. And I find those, you know, that same pattern existing across 2 of the investors is interesting.
Really? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's quite different to what certainly the places that you've mentioned you're inspecting, Daria, you know, apartments on the northern beaches where there's just so much competition. It feels like this is a complete step change.
It's ridiculous. And it's like, and it's funny because as we're talking to Emma, I'm just thinking, apartments, why am I looking at apartments? And then it's like, and why are so many chicken nuggets fighting over these apartments? It's like apartments are like this black hole of like money loss and, you know, strata boards who now I'm like mortified to even encounter. It's like, you're right, you know, they're fighting over it, and it's very scary, and it's very, not scary, it's just quite intimidating. I don't like it. I don't like, you know, if there's like 5 dogs fighting over a bone, I'll let them have the bone and I'll go and find my own bone somewhere else. You know what I mean? That's just who I am. And so the Northern Beaches is definitely not working in my favor in that respect, because everyone, no matter where on the Northern Beaches, because people are like, there's the higher end and the lower end, and you can invest here and invest there. But I'm beginning to think I'm going to knock on Cessnock's door. So.
I will say about regional though, like, which is just a thing to be mindful of. There's regional and there's regional.
Right.
But I'm not talking regional. I'm talking like, a town that's really dependent on one industry, like mine. And you can get really high rental yields where you'll be cash flow positive, but they don't really grow. Like you can look at the historical prices over 10 years. Every now and then there's a boom in those towns, but quite often they kind of just stay the same.
I think that's a really, really good point, actually, Emma. That's super important. It's like regional with intention again. You know, you're looking at parts of Cessnock where people are going to, you know, they're going to live there. They're a stone's throw away from the Hunter Valley. There's a lot going on. So it's not like you're going in the middle of nowhere where, you know, there's no one to help renovate it. Things are going to fall apart. No, you've got to be very intentional about that next purchase. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just in our last maybe 3 minutes, if we can rapid fire through one or two more questions.
Yeah.
Are there any tips or tricks you have about investing that others could benefit from?
Tips or tricks? So number one, you don't need to save a lot. It's like you don't need to start in Sydney, or where if you live in a capital city, you don't need to start there. That's the first thing. You can look elsewhere and just get on the ladder earlier by going with what you've got. Here's a second one that I haven't mentioned. I think a lot of people, I think it might be the media that's driven this, is like believe you need to save 20%. And there's this quote that the guys on the Property Couch podcast say, like, when it comes to avoiding LMI, so lender's mortgage insurance. Their quote is like, when it comes to LMI, embrace it if you have to, avoid it if you can. If the opportunity cost, like just say you've got $50,000 and you're like, I could either save more to get that 20% deposit for like the property that we want to buy, or the area that we want to invest in or buy in, whatever. It's like you could potentially just get on the ladder. And yes, there's LMI, but you're getting on the ladder. You're going to see some compounding gains from just getting on the ladder as early as possible. With the first property we bought, that was it might be a 5% deposit, something like that. But it definitely wasn't 20. So there was LMI there. But it's just like the cost of LMI is often, in many cases, far less than the compounding gains you're going to get over the next 12, 24 months and going into the like far future as well. So that's probably a trick there, is like it does not have to be 20%. Like if you have to pay LMI, so be it. At least you're just getting on the ladder.
Yeah. And then it's things like to set yourself up, you know, buying land, buying an occupier,
Being intentional about which part of regional Australia you want to invest in. No pools, because I've known this, but I haven't really actively told because I'm a water baby myself, you know.
And avoid apartments.
No apartments.
No apartments.
And that's a wrap for our first episode with Emma. You really want to hear her second episode. She talks about how she got a house for $100,000 less than the market price. And we also dive into why she says she would never buy an off-the-plan apartment. This is a really important conversation for people who are considering buying an apartment or buying something off the plan. You really want to hear these stories. Join us for Emma's second episode really soon.